There is a place that is spoken about only in whispers, a dark area that spawns the beginnings of urban legends, a place where anything can happen and usually does. During the light of day, it hides just outside of view, but when the sun goes down, spirits, creatures of the night, roam free, and things do go bump in the night. It is in every state and every country, and there is no escaping it, no matter how safe you feel behind your locked doors and latched windows. So we invite you to turn down the lights and turn up your radio while we join Dave Schrader and Tim Dennis, your hosts, on a journey into the darkness on the edge of town.
Hello and welcome. It's Wednesday and you're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. Beyond the Darkness is on the air, and today we've got a great guest joining us, one of our favorites, Rosemary Ellen Guiley. She's a leading expert, best-selling author, researcher, and media personality, and she is one of the biggest names in the paranormal field. She has over 65 books to her credit, and she hosts Strange Dimensions Radio on KGRA. She's the executive editor of Fate magazine and is president of Visionary Living, Inc., a publishing and media company. She lives in New Milford, Connecticut. She has co-authored a new book with Michael Bryan, the title, The Road to Strange, Travel Tales of the Paranormal and Beyond. And if there's anybody that has had a chance to travel and see the strangest places on Earth, it has to be our guest. Rosemary, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Dave. It's a pleasure to be with you.
This is a great book. I'm glad that you finally sat down to get something going like this, because you have had a rich history of being able to visit some of the most unbelievable locations on the planet. And I'm glad that you and your co-author are finally getting together to put together some stories and histories of some of these locations. You've been investigating the paranormal, researching and writing about this for years. Are there any places that really stand out to you above the normal of high strangeness and weird activity?
Yes, there are. There are a good number of them internationally, and one of them is the San Luis Valley, which hits part of New Mexico into Colorado. It's well known as a UFO corridor for skinwalkers, for mysterious creatures and entities, all kinds of hauntings. I have spent time in the San Luis Valley. That's pretty bizarre. Stonehenge is another place. People are likely to have mystical experiences on the other end of the spectrum there. And in fact, in The Road to Strange, we have a story from a woman whose creativity for songwriting burst out after she had an unusual experience while visiting Stonehenge. And I think places activate us and affect us. When we go to a place where we tap into an expansive sort of energy like Stonehenge, the effect is likely to be one of feeling uplifted. We're in contact with something transcendent to ourselves. Maybe we feel a new burst of energy within us, like the songwriter did. And then when we go to places like the San Luis Valley, it's not like bad energy, but it's a different energy, and it connects us to a weirder side of the unknown. And when we travel, a lot of times we don't, the average traveler is not a paranormal investigator like me. The average traveler goes out on a business trip, goes on vacation. They're not necessarily looking for something paranormal, and yet it bursts upon people all the time, spontaneously and unexpectedly.
Yeah, I've found it's funny. A lot of these bed and breakfasts I've visited throughout the years when I'm traveling, I'll just pick a nice looking small bed and breakfast, and they usually have these little diaries in the room. And I'll start flipping through them, and it's amazing to me how many of these diaries are filled with paranormal encounters. And it wasn't even a hotel that was billed as being haunted, but I'll ask and then ask if I can read some of the diaries in the other rooms, and you'll find that there are these interesting stories written at different times from different people that all seem to match up. And you get the feeling that these people never spoke to one another or saw the other diaries, but their stories are so intricate and detailed and bizarre that, yeah, I'm starting to believe we're constantly surrounded by the paranormal. I thought you used to have to find locations, and I think it might just be there all the time.
It really is. That's a very good point. It literally is around us all the time, and most of the time people just tune it out. And I think that in the last decade or so, as you know, with all of the documentaries and reality shows focusing on the paranormal, it's gotten more and more people to think along those lines. And yes, the diaries, I've been seeing more of those in places too. In years past, it used to be, nice little comments like, "Oh, we loved our stay, what a charming place."
Right.
And now people are more likely to put in their paranormal experiences.
I'm curious now, you were talking about the, what was this, San Luis Valley? Is that how you...
Yes, San Luis Valley.
When you mention skinwalkers, for our listeners that are kind of new and maybe not familiar with all the different terminology, what exactly is your definition of a skinwalker?
Well, the correct definition of a skinwalker is a sorcerer, and this is especially a tradition among the Navajo. And they literally get out of their human skin and into another skin, usually an animal or some sort of a hybrid. And it is said that they go out at night and perform their magic, and quite often their black magic. Over the course of time, skinwalkers has become applied to weird creatures as well that look to be hybrid of some sort, bipedal hybrids. But the correct definition is a shape-shifting sorcerer.
Now, I'm curious about that. I'm sure you remember. Do you remember the classic movie The Other, which was about the two twins and the grandmother that was teaching them to kind of use their gypsy abilities to see through the eyes of birds, and they would kind of meditate and then connect? Do you remember that at all?
I did not see that movie.
Oh, wow.
Sounds like something I should catch up with.
Yeah, and it's out on video. It's one of my favorite movies. If you get a chance to check it out, please do. And it's called The Other. And I think it's Uta Hagen who plays the grandmother in the movie. And she does this kind of meditative connection, and she'll say, you'll focus, and all of a sudden their consciousness is in the bird, and they'll be able to see what the bird sees. Do you believe that that's what these sorcerers are doing with skinwalking? Are they really taking on the shape of an animal, or are they inhabiting a living animal and using it as like an Uber system for their soul for a while?
I think that there are different levels of these shape-shifting effects, and it may depend upon the individual sorcerer, the tradition, the job that they want to go out and do. And one is that you project your consciousness into a temporary astral form. And under certain circumstances, other people may actually be able to see this astral form. So the astral form would take on the look and the characteristics of the animal or bird and enable the consciousness of the sorcerer to go about in that vehicle with all of those abilities. And I do believe that some of them would have the capability of temporarily possessing an animal, where they could sort of ride along with an animal and control its movements. Shape-shifting like that enables human beings to navigate around in different ways and to use animal powers to move quickly, to be stealthy, to have certain kinds of strength. If it's done on the astral plane, then there's the factor of invisibility, because this form could be rendered invisible to a lot of people, and that's certainly extra stealth as well.
Yeah, that aspect of this really fascinates me, and especially with the Native American culture and the possibilities or probabilities. I've often thought that makes a lot more sense to me than the idea that they're changing into wolf or bear form or monsters, that are lurking in the woods. Is maybe more of a spiritual connection with these animals, where they are, in effect, skinwalking. They're walking in the skins of another animal through their consciousness.
I agree, and I've taken a look at shape-shifting. In fact, I'm just coming out with a book on werewolves and dogmen in another month or so, and I have some shape-shifting pieces on that, the berserker, for example. And is it literally a physical transformation? Are werewolves literally a physical transformation? I don't think so. I think it's more done on the astral level or as a takeover.
You also mentioned that it's kind of this UFO corridor, and I know there are different aspects and points throughout the United States that people refer to as UFO corridors. Can you explain that a little bit to our listeners? What does that mean, and involve?
These are hot spots where people are very likely to see some sort of UFO or mysterious light activity in the sky, or perhaps to even have contact experiences. And there are certain places on the Earth that just seem to be magnets for this kind of thing. And I've posited that maybe they are in proximity to an interdimensional portal, because I do believe that what we label as extraterrestrial is more likely connected to the Earth. It's in a parallel dimension, so it's interdimensional, not an interterrestrial, not extraterrestrial. And nobody really knows why some of these corridors exist in that fashion. Having tried to identify over the years the characteristics of hotspots that I call portal areas, I have found patterns in certain geophysical conditions and structures, like content in the soil, sometimes contours of the land, and of course many of them are out in remote areas. So if you go out to places in the San Luis Valley, for example, and do sky watching, you have better odds of seeing something unusual or unexplained than you would in a lot of other locations. And there's some places in England like that as well. For example, if you go around the Silbury Hill area, where a lot of crop circle activity has taken place, the UFO activity tends to be a bit higher there too. So there may be something about magnetic fields, the way the Earth changes and affects natural magnetic fields. A lot of these phenomena that we call paranormal do seem to have a magnetic or electromagnetic component to them, and it may be a warping or intensifying of magnetic lines of energy that enable these things to manifest.
That's a fascinating aspect. It's really interesting to me, too, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this. There are military installations that seem to be near many of these corridors, and I wonder if the military chose those locations because of some kind of geomagnetic principle that they were able to pick up on, or because which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did they put it up there because there was this energy and that's what they were drawn to, or were they drawn there because UFOs and high strangeness took place in these locations?
It's a question that a lot of us have certainly asked about why things are located where they are throughout history. And when you look at where people have put up sacred sites, for example, they are in these areas of very intense energy where people are affected. They have unusual experiences. They have contact experiences. And so the question is, well, do they have them because the sacred site, the temple, for example, is located there, or was the temple located there because of the energy? And I think in many cases we'll never know the answer. But with regard to the military installations, it does make you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, because are they policing those areas? Are those ruptures in time and space? That's why they have military installations close by, so that they can monitor that a little bit more closely? It's definitely a fascinating aspect. Yeah,
my personal feeling is that it has to be going on. That we hear these comments from sources and the insider sources all the time saying, oh, the government's too busy to do this, and the UFO community is too paranoid about the attention it thinks it's getting. My feeling is that the government/military would have to stay on top of these things. Because anything that has the potential to affect masses of people, how they think and react and what they do, which would include eruptions of activity from unknown sources, like potentially crap from other dimensions. The power structures would want to know about this and keep tabs on it.
We're going out, I'm going in August and in September to England with a group of our listeners. We still have a few seats that are available for the August trip. You can find that information at darknessevents.com. But we're going to be visiting all of these amazing historic haunted sites. We're even going to be stopping at Rendlesham Forest to do a walkthrough, and we're going to be visiting Stonehenge. So when you brought up Stonehenge, that really kind of connected. I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that. Have you yourself had a chance to go to Stonehenge?
I've been to Stonehenge a number of times, Dave, and I even had the privilege years ago when it was possible to do so. I rented Stonehenge out for myself, and you can't do that at least as easily these days. But years ago, for a very small sum of money, you could rent Stonehenge after hours, and it could be just you and a friend, a group of 50, whatever. And you would have from closing time until dusk. If you did it at dawn, you would have it from dawn until opening time. And I did that several times. So on two of those occasions, it was just me and one other person. We had Stonehenge all to ourselves. And it is a very intense energy place. Now you can still get inside the stones. Tour groups can arrange to take groups inside the stones after hours, but they've really restricted access. And now you walk around a path from a rather safe distance around the stones. Too many episodes, unfortunately, of people trying to damage the stones or deface them has led to this. But there is an energy there, and you can't help but be affected by it. And I hear this all the time from people, and I felt it myself too, that the stones have a story to tell, that they can speak to you. And if you can tune into them, you can literally download something from them. And that's what happened to our storyteller in The Road to Strange. She felt that the stones were singing. She could pick up on the music of the stones. And I've heard that from other people as well. Now, I think what happened with her is she was in a situation where she wasn't happy at her job back in the States. She had obviously some latent creativity that she hadn't developed, and I think it was ready to break out. And so visiting a sacred site, tuning into that energy, having the psychic, mystical experience of listening to the Song of the Stones, it enabled that to blossom in her, and it really changed her life. And that's one of the things that travel does, and then when travel combines with having a psychic or mystical experience, people literally are changed, and sometimes for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that was one of the stops I said for certain that we needed to make was to Stonehenge so that we could all get out. I know we can't get very close to it. They've got a lot of it roped off now, as you were mentioning, but I just wanted to get near that site to just kind of soak in that atmosphere and energy, and it's just such a historic location. What are some of the other hotspots maybe in England that you can mention to us that either you visited or has been covered in the new book?
Well, from Stonehenge, you're very close to Silbury Hill, which is another site of a lot of unusual activity. And there are some old Neolithic burial grounds around there. There's the Long Barrow, the West Kennet Long Barrow. And you can take all that in a day. You can do Stonehenge, the West Kennet Long Barrow, and Silbury Hill. And you're not very far from Avebury either, which is another smaller standing stone monument that you can actually walk around and touch the stones and have some experiences there. I highly recommend them. I've been out to Rendlesham. Now, the area that surrounds Rendlesham is known for going back into time for its witchy ways. A lot of witchcraft and folk magic traditions coming out of that part of England. And when you put that in the context of the UFO event that took place there, the Bentwater/Rendlesham event, we get back to this question of why here?
Right.
Is it because there was something in the land, the energy that enabled this to happen, that drew it to happen? But it's a real spooky area around there, and I think that probably a lot of the people in your tour will tune into that.
Well, that's the hopes. Yeah, we're looking forward to kind of connecting with a bunch of the different aspects. And England is so rich with history, right? And there's been such weird aspects of history that have taken place there, from the original witch hunts to wartime to, all types of issues, if you will, with their culture and time. So it's, I would guess, probably going to be one of the most haunted locations we'll ever have a chance to visit.
I've done quite a bit of traveling around England, a little bit in Scotland, tiny bit in Ireland, and I've also been to Wales as well. Over the years, many, many places, and it is, from a paranormal perspective, a very energetic location. You almost have to ask what isn't haunted there as opposed to what is.
Right.
And this energy is so deeply imbued. Literally, I call it the blood and the bones of the soil. That whatever has created these atmospheres and these places where the phenomena exist, it's so deep, literally in the soil of the country and in the culture of the country, because, they've got a lot more centuries going on us than we do.
You know what, Rosemary, and I've meant to talk to you about this off air, but I'll bring it up now as you talk about the blood and bones of the country. Something kind of fascinating occurred to me a few years ago. We were talking with Sergeant Paul Dosty, and he is a cadaver dog specialist. And his dog Buster was one of the top 3 cadaver dogs in the world. And he was talking to me about how Buster has been able to mark locations where bodies have been for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I thought about that. I'm like, how is that even possible? The degradation, the soil, the breakdown. And he said that their noses are so specifically concentrated to find this detail, this type of bone, this type of marrow, this type of blood, that energy still exists and they can find it. And that started to make a lot of sense to me when you think of places like Gettysburg here in the United States, where they still see the troops walking around on the field and they'll hear gunshots and things going on. I was really impacted by the fact that science is explaining with a cadaver dog how they can smell something hundreds of years dead after rain and snow and wind and everything you would have thought would have eroded that chemical signature. And since we don't know where the soul truly resides, is it part of every aspect of us? Maybe that's why hauntings continue in these locations and will. And that you would think that after all these years, Gettysburg would have settled down. But it doesn't, because it's the blood and bones of that land that really seems to be holding that energy. And that's been a really kind of an intriguing find for me, talking to an officer who wasn't interested in the paranormal angle of it. But as we discussed it further, he's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That might be why there's hauntings, because that energy does still exist hundreds of years later, and the dog can prove it.
I didn't know that about cadaver dogs, that they could sense something that old, but it makes a tremendous amount of sense to me from the perspective, just as you said, Dave, about how the phenomena can linger over such a long period of time, and then we have the capability of picking up on it too, not with the unique sensitivity that a dog does, but we have different ways of picking up on that. The very first time that I went to England, it was 1983, and I got off the plane and I could feel it. I literally could feel this energy in the land. And I said to myself I said, it's the blood and the bones in the soil. That's what I'm feeling. And that has just been reinforced me over and over again over the years, that the essence of living things goes into the soil.
Right.
And that energy remains for a long period of time. I think that there is a sort of a battery life to a lot of it, and that's one of the reasons why old famous hauntings from centuries ago don't seem to be so dramatic now, or maybe even exist now, that they kind of, the ever-ready bunny just didn't do the job, and, they've run out of steam.
Sure.
But, yeah, we leave these imprints. Everything leaves an imprint. And if we tuned into it all, if we were all like dogs, we would probably be so overwhelmed that we wouldn't know how to orient ourselves.
which is what a lot of mediums and psychics have spoken to, believe that some homeless people are doing, that they're actually not crazy. They're not schizophrenic or hearing voices that don't exist. They just may be a wide open conduit that is just being bombarded, where a medium might get, the information coming through a steady, dial-up line. This person's on high capacity, fast DSL, and that's just too much for their brain, and that's why they are erratic and out of control, is because they are way too open to that aspect of our existence, the energy transference, and all of what is still around us. So that was kind of that's made me certainly look at people on the streets a little differently than I used to before, because you realize this may just be a very powerful medium who just has no idea how to ground themselves.
As is sometimes the case, and also certain individuals who are bipolar, who are autistic, even certain people who suffer from schizophrenia, also have much different filters than the average person. Their filters are wider open than the average person's. And for some of those individuals, those openings just don't close, and they have a lot of difficulty dealing with the input.
And what's really intriguing to me, too, as we're discussing this, I think of how many people I know that are sensitives, and a lot of them will tell you it's their connection. They'll go out and just push their fingers into the ground, or they'll go walk barefoot in the grass or in the ground or on the sand, and they're connecting. And to me, that always just sounded like hippy-dippy stuff. And it's like, okay, right, hug a tree, feel the grass, smell the tree, that's your connection. But as we're talking about this and all that has gone into the earth and everything that's been there, it's starting to make a lot of sense to me that maybe the reason they are so adept at pulling on this energy is because they are reconnecting. They're constantly plugging back into that neural net that seems to be right underneath the topsoil. And with some of these people that are graced with these abilities and maybe overwhelmed by them, like we were just speaking with some of these people that are considered bipolar or schizophrenic, if they're out there and they're immersed in this all the time, I would think would drive anybody mad if you just were an open sieve that things would, that information was just coming to at all times.
It is very disturbing, and I've worked with psychics over the years who have a marked degree of empathy, and for some of them, they have a difficult time keeping their boundaries up. They're so easily impacted by energy, by thoughts and feelings, and picking up on events in the past in places that it stays with them. They have a hard time getting it out of their heads, out of their systems. And for some of them, it's a constant struggle to keep energetic barriers up so that they're just literally not overwhelmed. And most of us, ordinary folks, we don't have those issues. We have to work to open up so that we can experience those things. And I think as human evolution goes on, we are going to be expanding our consciousness more, that we will have a greater sensitivity to these subtle energies. Everything has a frequency, and
right. As a matter of fact, psychometry. Right, psychometry was really kind of introduced to me through you at one of the old UNIFCON deals. You taught a course on psychometry that I went to and watched.
I remember that, yes.
And I thought, oh, this is crazy. You just touch something and you pick up on it. And I actually had really kind of interesting experiences with that. So again, you're thinking, if people are out and about and immersed in this, and psychometry, for those of you that don't know, it's when you will touch something that belongs to another and you start to pick up on the impressions or the energy of that. And like you said, just stop questioning, no matter how obscure or weird what you think you're seeing or experiencing is, and just share it. And this couple had given me a ring, and I was holding it, and I said, all right, I I'm seeing a tall glass of iced tea, and the glass is sweating, and it's sitting on the counter, and it looks refreshing and cool. And they started laughing. She goes, that's all he drinks is iced tea. And then I said, okay, now I'm seeing like a road, but it looks like it's torn up and they're doing road work. And I'm getting a lot of like flashes of red. and road work, and she laughs and she said, yeah, the house we live in, the whole street has been torn up for months. We're livid about it. They've been working it. And to me, that was like a mind blowing experience, because I didn't believe that, you just touch something and you start to get these impressions. But man, after relaxing and walking through it the way you taught us, there was something to it. So you think that was me trying to focus and really pushing to try to open up that part of my consciousness. And if people are some are just so attuned to it, and they're out there with the blood and bones of our world, there's got to be a lot of information that's going in. I guess it's good that we're not all that hypersensitive, or we would all be crazy.
Well, we would have to figure out how to process it and keep our orientation. And so, there's a purpose to not tuning into all of this, because a lot of it would be overwhelming. But I do believe that as human beings evolve, our capacity to absorb and integrate this information will improve as well. And so the human of the future is going to have a vastly different view of reality than we have today. 3D reality is not going to exist the way we experience it now. It's going to incorporate more of these things that we call para-physical and paranormal.
Traveling and getting a chance to see all these places, I love that aspect of my life, and I know that you do, and you get a chance to go visit remarkable places. That's what we're discussing today on the show, and Rosemary's new book that she's co-authored with Michael Bryan, The Road to Strange, Travel Tales of the Paranormal and Beyond. We'll continue talking about the book. We'll hear some more of the weird experiences that Rosemary has had herself while out traveling, and hear some more of the experiences that they've chronicled in the brand new book. And we'll have links up to the book and to Rosemary's website as well, so you can follow her and keep up with the work she's doing. And she is one of the most prolific authors out there. She just put out this book. She's got the new book coming out already on skinwalkers and werewolves and dogmen. So I'm sure we'll be talking to her again around Halloween for those type of books. Stay tuned though. We've got a lot more coming your way right here on the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.
Beyond the Darkness.
We're back. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Today with me, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, The Road to Strange, Travel Tales of the Paranormal and Beyond. She's written and co-authored up to 65 books on the strange and supernatural world around us. Always a great pleasure to have her join us. And today we're talking about the new book, Road to Strange, she co-authored with Michael Bryan, and Travel Tales of the Paranormal and Beyond. Let's start covering some of your favorite stories in the new book.
Well, one of them is actually from Ireland, and it was a woman who went with her husband and daughter. Never been to Ireland before, but she had family in Ireland. She had, ancestors, and she had a host of experiences there. In fact, it's one of the longer stories in the book because it covers so many different kinds of phenomena. She had time slips. She had ghost activity. She had
now explain time slips. Yeah, explain time slip, because we always get new listeners in who are not proficient with these different terms. What does a time slip mean, and can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Different factors involved in time slips. It's like suddenly you're out of this time and you're in you're in the same place but some other time. And for many people, it's going into the past. And the environment seems to shift around you. Sometimes a fog descends. A sudden fog came around her. She had voices in the fog that told her, it's nice you came back. We've missed you. She'd never been to Ireland before, and she was wondering if she was tapping into the voices of the ancestors. Sometimes people will actually see things in the environment that existed in the past that don't exist anymore. And while she didn't have that particular experience, I've had, I remember years ago I interviewed someone who had been traveling in the Southwest, and they stopped at a diner that looked like it was an old 50s diner. And all the prices were like from the 50s too, just really cheap. And they had a meal, they left, and started talking about how weird the place was, and everything was so strange there. The whole environment felt strange. At a later time, they went back to try and find the diner again, and it wasn't there. It didn't exist. They discovered that it had existed and had been torn down. So they had this time slip back into the 50s. And with Cynthia, she was visiting a sacred site in Ireland, and a fog descended on her, and she had these experiences with these voices from the past. And when the fog lifted, she thought just a few minutes had passed. An hour had passed. And her family had been looking for her. They didn't see the fog. They didn't know where she'd gone. They didn't know what happened to her. She had more experiences at a haunted castle that she and her family stayed in, where apparitions of deceased people showed up on television screens that were turned off. They had more strange sensations of the passage of time, where time seemed to be very slowed down. And I think that these things happen when we get into the different frequency and energy of a place. And Ireland, you've been to Ireland, it operates on its own wavelength.
Yes, it does, but it is magical. I'll tell you that. I've never felt more amazed in any country I've ever visited than Ireland.
It is, and so some people are better able to tune into the environmental frequencies than other people. And when they do, they can be transported into strange experiences that literally do seem to be out of linear time. And that was the case with her. She had, a good 7 or 8 unusual experiences. Most people are going to have maybe 1 or 2 in a place, but she had a lot of them. And she had, as I mentioned, had never been there before. She felt like she had download experiences. One of the most unusual was she visited a fairy mound, and they go by different names. In some parts of England, they're called fagoos. They're sort of like holes in the ground that are supposed to be like the entry places to another world. And so she went to this particular place that had an underground chamber, and tradition holds that if you go into these chambers and you meditate, you might have contact experiences or something unusual might happen to her. Well, she set an intention, and she had vision problems like most of us do, farsighted, nearsighted. And so her intention was that she was going to let all of her traumas concerning injuries to her sight go, and let Mother Earth receive the energy, and that maybe her vision would be healed. And when she came out, here again, more strange passage of time. She thought she'd been there a short period of time, and when she emerged, she discovered she'd been in the fairy chamber all day, but her vision had changed. And she did not need glasses anymore for 10 years.
That's
so
how do we
happened to her.
Yeah, how do we even begin to explain? I mean, okay, maybe it was heavily laden with electromagnetic principles that could have affected the fluids in her eyes. I mean, what would science say? There's got to be some rational explanation for something like that to happen.
Well, either that or we just have to lump it into the miraculous healing sort of thing. Oddly, fairies are heavily connected with changes in vision. And according to lore, if the fairies liked you, they would give you second sight. They would expand your vision to be psychic, clairvoyance. And if they didn't like you, if you did something that displeased them, they could strike you blind. So she goes down into a fairy mound chamber and asks for a healing for her vision. And we can speculate that was she so connected ancestrally or through the land, she had already been resonating with everything, that maybe the fairies took a liking to her and healed her vision. But, some time had passed since she told the story for the book, and she said for 10 years she did not need corrective lenses. That's really an amazing story.
That's a great story. And I know there's been other stories like this where people feel like they've stumbled into fairyland. And I know there are some listeners out there rolling their eyes right now and laughing, but there are people that have had these weird claims and they've seen things and experienced, and they've been with large groups of people who suddenly cannot find them. That's pretty intriguing.
I've had many experiences with fairies, and I've believed in them since I was a kid. I had fairy experiences when I was a kid. I've had them as adults, and I'm a total believer in fairies. I think that they are beings that share the earth with us. They populate the landscape, and they operate at a different vibrational wavelength, and sometimes we see them, sometimes they don't. The interesting thing, Dave, is that when it comes to all of these what we would call paranormal encounters, I've always had the feeling, and other people do too, that it's the beings or the entities that make the decision whether or not they will allow us to see them. And there does seem to be very good evidence for that. And I've often wondered why it is that some people have these experiences and some people don't, because the stuff is around us all the time, and maybe these other entities sense the innate ability in some individuals to see them or tune into their wavelength, and so they say, okay, here I am, I'll come out for you. And they have the ability to make themselves known in our world, but we don't seem to go marching into theirs. We don't go off and have a day in Bigfoot land and come back and talk about it.
I'd like to. Just tell me where to sign up.
So would I.
Yeah. All right. So this woman had a lot of experiences and a myriad of locations it's going through. When you hear somebody like this and they've had so many experiences, does it ever raise your eyebrow and make you question the authenticity of these stories? What are they really trying to get across? Or how do you start to gauge with your BS meter whether you're onto something with a person or they're just trying to grab attention?
It's a gut instinct thing, and it's not a perfect system for any of us when we're gauging any researcher. When we're gauging the veracity of the subjective anecdotal experiences of others. And I think anyone who's interviewed enough people over time, you get a pretty good sense for what's likely to be a real experience and what sounds rather embellished and over the top. I will say this for most people, when they come forward with their stories, it's often reluctantly because the average person still worries about being considered a crackpot or crazy by talking about something unusual like this. And so a lot of people tend to keep quiet. And there's a worry that they have that if they tell their story to the wrong person, they're going to be ridiculed. And so it's not easy for some people to talk about their experiences, and that sincerity will come through. I often gauge things by how they fit into patterns. Not that every story has to be the same, all the characteristics have to be the same, but there are certain ranges that if someone's going to have a fairy experience or a ghost experience or UFOs, there are going to be certain hallmarks that are likely to be present in that story. And oftentimes, the more detail you get, the less, it might be a little more embellished then, because I think a lot of these experiences are fleeting. They're incomplete. They're perceived on an intuitive and even holistic way. And it's not like watching a movie or even being in a movie. And so it's, like I said, it's a very inexact art.
Let's talk about some of the more bizarre cases in the book, too, that you were able to cover. Was there any that really stood out as just being kind of a frightening encounter and bizarre tale with whatever experience it was?
Well, there was one that stood out for me in a way, and unfortunately it had a good ending, but it's called the devil snake. And I think it's a good example of how we put ourselves at risk by laughing at local customs. And so a man who's a doctor goes down to Mexico on a trip to visit Mayan ruins in the Yucatan, and he's with a guide, local guide, and they have an encounter with a fer-de-lance snake, which is highly poisonous, and the guide shoots it and kills it. And he explains that he actually smelled the snake. He had to kill it because it was a revenge thing. A fer-de-lance had bitten his daughter, and his daughter had almost died. So it was his revenge against the snake, that kind of snake. Well, one man in the group wanted to take the snake as a trophy, take the skin. And so the doctor, who is the author of the story, offered to behead the snake and give him the skin. And the guide said, "Don't touch it. Don't touch it. It's a devil snake. It's a devil snake." Well, they all laughed at this as like superstition. And so the doctor beheaded the snake and gave this other fellow the skin, and he was going to turn it into a trophy. And the spirit of that snake wrapped around his arm, the arm that he used to cut off the head. And he did not know it. And it was sometime later that he was in an energy workshop, a HUNA, system of energy and healing and magic. He was attending that in Hawaii. And it was a workshop to get rid of all the attachments and things that you have afflicting you that hold you back. And that's when he made the discovery that this snake spirit was coiled around his arm like a big bracelet. And he was able to deal with it. And it was fortunate for him because had he not, I think the spirit of that snake would have adversely affected. It would have, quote unquote, bitten him at some time. Maybe in a health way, maybe in a bad luck, but the snake spirit would have had its own revenge. And that's kind of it's a story that is a reminder that when we're told local customs, and especially about supernatural things, and many indigenous people in other countries have knowledge about the supernatural realm that we ignore, don't have in this culture, instead of laughing at it and dismissing it, we should take these things seriously for our own well-being.
Now you've got me really worried, because as if it's not bad enough of my fear of real living snakes, Rosemary, now there are ghost snakes I have to be aware of?
Only if you behead them, Dave.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just stay away from them. They stay away from me. We should be okay.
Exactly. And I'll just add that the same, we have two stories from this doctor in the book, okay. And, they were both like, I should have been paying more attention. He was death cursed by an Apache and had some serious trouble. He dated an Apache woman on a reservation where he was working. Her relatives put a death curse on him. He was almost killed in a freeway accident. He came down with a very bad case of hepatitis that was life-threatening. And he had to have the curse lifted by an Apache medicine man. If he hadn't learned that he'd had a death curse put on him, here again we have to speculate, well, what would have happened to him in the long run? Because curses are real.
Talk to me about curses then, from your experience and understanding. You say it so matter-of-factly. Curses are real. Are they only real to the people that believe in them, or can I curse somebody, they don't even have to know it, and it really works in their life?
The answer is you don't have to believe in curses to be affected by one. And there are two ways. There are two basic systems. One is that you let the victim know they've been cursed, and then they bring a fear and anxiety that becomes part of the fulfillment of that curse. But many times curses are laid on people, and they don't know it. And they can definitely have an effect. Now, it takes You have to know what you're doing. It takes a lot of energy to do it. Probably the mildest kind of cursing can be done by anyone, just as a form of ill wishing. Like, I really don't like you, and I wish something bad would happen to you. That sort of thing. And if you do that with enough intensity over and over again, you could effectively send someone cursed energy. But whether or not it would land and take effect is not quite the same as someone with a lot of magical skill who knows what they're doing. They employ the spirit world to help them carry out a curse. And so he was cursed to death, which actually was an extreme thing to do just because, the girl dated him, and the family didn't want her dating a white man. They wanted her to date other Apaches. And they were afraid that he was going to have an influence on her, so her aunt put a death curse on him. He could have, his health and life could have deteriorated to the point where it might have been fatal. But he did have the curse lifted by another Apache who did it not in his presence. He went to the medicine man and through an interpreter explained his problem. The medicine man said he would take care of it. We don't know how he did. And then he was okay. But here again, it's these things can hit us unawares. Now, in the Huna system, there is a type of death curse that is renowned in lore and literature for its effectiveness. It's reserved for people who have, it's sort of like the death sentence that in our criminal system, it's reserved for people who have committed the worst possible crimes. And it has been documented as being effective, that when this magical curse has been put against you, you do die. So there are traditions all over the world for this. And
are there ways to just always shield yourself so that people can't cast these curses against you?
I do believe so, yes. And if we keep up our natural defenses in the aura being the energy shield of vital life force around you, and if we keep that in good health, like it's an armor around us, if we keep up our spiritual foundation, our spiritual underpinning, and we have a connection to something transcendent, these seem to be the best buffers against any kind of negativity coming at us. And just because a curse is thrown doesn't mean it's going to take effect. Some of them don't. They become nullified or they bounce back to the sender. And I think that having that spiritual underpinning and orientation, meditation and prayer are the best way to power that shield of energy around you. That's really your best defense.
That's even more chilling to me. It's bad enough we got to worry about ghosts, goblins, fairies, and demons, but that people are doing things and sending negative energies towards one another and can affect and impact the health and life of others is really scary.
It is scary, and I think that a lot of curses don't go anywhere because they don't have the right energy, or they're not done right, or the victim has a good shield around them. But we'll never really know the true incidence of cursing because it's been part of human society throughout history. And in ancient times, it was considered perfectly normal and acceptable to ritually and professionally curse your enemy. The Romans were quite adept at it. They had professional cursers. Imagine making your living as a professional curser. But yeah,
I think that's Howard Stern's job anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, and what curse can I do for you today? But the Romans would routinely curse their business rivals, their sports rivals, love rivals, people who upset or cross them. They'd run off to one of these professional cursers, and the curse would usually be written down on a piece of lead, or sometimes a clay tablet, and invoke the gods, the angry gods, to bring death and destruction down upon the enemy. Before sports competitions, it was quite common for ritual cursing of all your competitive rivals to be done.
Well, that only happens now during the Super Bowl. You know what I'm curious about then, if that's the case, because they say the karmic retribution when you do something like that can return 100-fold to you. Is that why you would go to a cursor? Would I go to Rosemary to do my cursing so that you're the one that took the karmic backlash instead of me? Was that kind of the thought? I was keeping my hands clean of it kind of scenario?
Well, it's more that you go to the expert who knows what they're doing. It's like, would you operate on yourself? No. You'd go to a surgeon, who would know how to do it. And I think that the magical people who do these things, yes, they run quite a risk of backlash if the energy gets turned back on them. But I also think that the person who ordered it in the first place also is liable for some of that, because I do believe in a universal law that we reap what we sow, we get back what we put out, and if we put out destructive energy, that will come back on us too.
Are there cursed lands? I mean, where just everything and anything seems to be horribly wrong and it just continues to go there. Is that a real thing, do you think, or do curses really only take hold on living beings?
Energy and land. Yes, land can definitely be cursed too, for various reasons. Land can be like the guarded stronghold of certain entities. Fairies, for example, have been well documented in anecdote and lore of guarding certain places, and if human beings were foolish enough to venture into that territory, then bad things would happen to them. The energy of the landscape can have a negative effect too, and I think this has to do with natural things in the land that whatever those energies are, instead of having an uplifting, mystical effect on people, they have exactly the opposite. That when people go to these places, they are affected adversely by the energy. They feel sick or nauseated or oppressed. Take Salem, Massachusetts, for example. The local Indians considered the land that city exists on to be cursed land. It was not fit to live on. And in indigenous view, this can be for a whole host of things, that they just feel the energy is, they tune into the energy and they just don't think that, you're going to prosper there, or the spirits have a claim to it and human beings shouldn't get involved. But the pilgrims who were unhappy in Plymouth and split off to find their own community. And they went sailing around looking for a location, and they landed at what was called Namkig originally. And even though the Indians said, don't live here, this is cursed land, they put Salem up anyway. And is it any wonder that in addition to the politics of the place, the conditions then became ripe for the Salem witch hunt in the 1600s. I think that my personal feeling is that witch hysteria was a direct outgrowth and result from a community trying to prosper on cursed land. And it never worked from the beginning. It was full of rivalry, jealousy, backbiting, pinched and oppressive behavior, very oppressive laws, even worse than the Pilgrims in Plymouth. And these sorts of things just build up like gases and explode. And I consider Salem still a tough place today. I think it's a very difficult place to live in if you are trying to make it in the magical community. And I really love going to Salem. I go there a number of times a year. I enjoy doing events there and participating in the Halloween activities. But I think that it would be a difficult place to live.
Why can't we? You would think there are so many people that work in the light. And you and I have been at locations, Rosemary, the Queen Mary, the Stanley Hotel, Eastern State Penitentiary, Waverly Hills Sanitarium, where people go in and claim that they're clearing the location of these energies. And they're doing these ritualistic ways to try to break the negativity bonds or set these souls free. Why do you think that doesn't happen? Why is the next day everything's back to normal and things are so active again?
I think there are certain conditions that are just not going to change. And I've run into this in some of the jinn cases that I've done over the last decade or so, what I call as a category of persistent negative haunting. And these are cases where people are deeply afflicted by pestering negative entities. And it seems to be a combination of bad land, sometimes the individuals involved, and sometimes things that happened on the land. But there's always this configuration of land energy. And one of the most dramatic examples of that was a case that I had in New York. And the husband and wife were horribly afflicted in what should have been a bucolic country property. Everything from the look of it was just, who wouldn't want to live here? It's gorgeous land. It's a great old house, and it was horribly afflicted. And I studied that case before they sold it. I was able to investigate and research there for 3 years to document the ongoing activity that continued in a negative way that impacted the health of the individuals present, no matter what was done, that no remedy was permanent. There could be periods of temporary relief, but nothing was permanent. Well, that finally was sort of focused by a Taoist exorcist that was brought onto the property because we tried exorcisms of just about every stripe. And this guy was considered to be, one of the best exorcists in Taoism. And he spent 2 days on the property, and he said that he cleared 15 entities, and he had cleared a lot of bad energy out of the place. But he said there was one entity that wouldn't go. I think that was the jinn, because there was a jinn on the property. And he said, your land will be clear now for a while, but everything's going to come back because your land is open. And what he meant by that was that it had openings to the underworld, the spirit world, that were not going to close, that could not be closed. And that's just the way these places on Earth are. And that's exactly what happened. Things were quiet for a while, and then it all kicked up again. So I think this is something that we need to keep in mind as we humans push into more and more remote areas that have been, kind of undeveloped for a number of reasons. One is humans haven't gotten there yet, or B, they've been bypassed over more favorable places. And there are places that are energy afflicted. And if you put houses up on them, whatever is there in the land in terms of natural energy that has a negative influence, which in turn could attract negative spirits as well, then you're going to have problems. And some of these problems just aren't going to go away. So I think we need to realize that. We have the attitude that we can sweep out whatever we don't like. We can come in and clear it. I don't know how many people I have talked to over the years who've cleared everything out of Gettysburg. They just know it. And, I don't think they cleared a thing out. All of that stuff is stuck there in land energy. And it's whether or not it eventually has a battery life, we'll have to see. But we're 100 years on now, and 150 years on, and it's still going strong. We aren't connected to the energy of land.
That's wow, that's powerful. That's a lot of interesting information too when you're looking at the whole scope of what's going on in the world around us and why certain places are more haunted or have weirder activity taking place. It's interesting to know that the land has much to do with this as much as the human element does.
It does, and I think that it's now being taken into consideration by more and more paranormal teams as they've become aware of this as well. But, years ago, when people were out investigating, myself included, you didn't automatically think that there might be something weird going on with the land. I did really begin to notice very early on in my investigating career that there were certain patterns that started emerging in badly haunted places that didn't seem to resolve. And that's what got me going on profiling what I call portal areas. And so that model from quantum physics that holds that we have up to 11 dimensions right here stacked on top of us, which I think we do. We have parallel dimensions around us. There are bound to be thinner places and weak places and holes that open and close, and some of these afflicted areas may be fairly open all the time.
When you look at all the scope of the different high strangeness that seems to surround us, we know of haunted locations, UFO corridors. Are there places that seem to be ripe with monster encounters, creatures that don't really seem to be defined by any of the cryptid topics we've talked about, monsters outside of the realm of just Dogman, Bigfoot, and Chupacabra?
Well, there are a lot of mysterious creatures that are reported that seem to be one-offs, and they're never seen again, or if they are seen again, they're not quite the same. So those do happen, and I find quite a few cases like that in West Virginia. I've often jokingly called the entire state of West Virginia a portal because it has so many weird creatures documented, and a lot of it's remote. A good chunk of it's very mountainous, and human beings are not getting into some of those really, really deep areas. There are certain corridors in Pennsylvania, for example, where odd things are seen, mostly over on the western side of the state, which is the area where, it's the mountainous area of the state. And this is really a backbone of mountains that comes straight down in America, from New York, the Catskills, down into the Poconos are related to that, and then you've got the Alleghenies, and then the Appalachians, and the Brown Mountains. These mountains just kind of run straight down in a backbone through the country, and they change, and they're known by different names. And there seems to be something to whatever I think is in the soil or contours of this energetically in these mountains, because all you have to do is go up and down this mountain backbone, and you come across story after story through the ages of certain types of creatures or peoples or entities that are seen. They all have kind of a local twist and flavor to them, but they're heavily clustered along these mountain areas. And the Hudson River also. The entire Hudson Valley is another very active zone, all the way up to at least Lake George, and perhaps even further up than that. If you drive up the Taconic Highway along the Hudson, the odds are that you're likely to see something strange. People report UFO activity all the time. I've investigated dogmen sightings, hybrid creatures that just seem to be combinations of different things that don't fit into any particular category. Many ghost activities, and the little people. Even Henry Hudson, when he sailed around up and down the Hudson River, encountered the little people of the mountains and the Catskills.
What do you make of all those kind of claims? I mean, that many different creatures and beings that we have not cataloged, that we don't believe exist in the sense of, part of our regular zoological order. What do you think these are? Are we seeing slips through parallel dimensions? Are we seeing ghosts of past incarnations of beings and creatures? Or do you think that they're here all the time? We're just not noticing them?
Well, my working hypothesis has been and still is that these beings exist in their own realities, in these parallel worlds, and that when we're in the right place, in the right circumstances, and the right state of consciousness, we have these encounters, and it may also have to do with energetic openings and closings of these thin spots as well. The question is, are we seeing them in their true forms, or are we seeing them, are we interpreting them in the only way our brain can? We're coming up against something that registers on the eye and the brain, but unless you have a framework for comparison, you're not even going to see it. You're not going to understand it. So when we see these beings that seem to be like combinations of monstrous animals, for example, is that what they really look like, or is that how we're able to make sense of the energy that registers on us? And it could be a combination of those things. We simply don't know. Take Bigfoot, for example. Most sightings of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, they conform to a certain pattern range, which would indicate that, that's probably what these beings look like, with some variation. And other times, especially in the cases of one-offs, we have no idea whether or not we've encountered something that actually looks like that. And I think that here again, these are mysteries that may reveal themselves to us as our consciousness changes and we have a greater perception of these alternate realities. I call them alternate realities because they're different from this one, and that human beings of the future may see these creatures or beings very differently because our sensory perception of them has refined.
I'm always curious by this and these beings that are seen everywhere. But as we talk about, and we're wrapping up the show here, as we talk about some of these strange visions, there always seems to be these locations. Like when we were talking over in Europe, every castle has the woman in white or the woman in gray. And it seems every city and state across the United States has some kind of phantom hitchhiker. What do you make of phenomena like that? And do you have any famous phantom hitchhiker stories that you share as well?
It's interesting that these motifs exist, and some of them may be pulled from the collective consciousness of human beings. Why are there phantom hitchhikers all over the world, and are they a projection from human consciousness? For example, the fear of being out in a remote area, traveling and having something bad happen to you. Does that coalesce into a projection of the phantom hitchhiker, who is almost always a tragic figure, that something bad happened to them and now they're either lost souls or they become a negative force themselves? We have, just as an aside, we have kind of an amusing story from Australia in the book where through circumstances, a woman from England and her 2 young children emigrated to Australia, and the scheme that they were participating in for relocation turned out to be not so good. And so with no money and no possessions, she was trying to hitchhike from the desert to Sydney, well over 100 miles, through a very desolate plain called the Nullarbor Plain. And nobody would pick her up. She had signs, please help. She's got 2 kids. She said, you'd think that a woman struggling with 2 children, in the desert, somebody would come and pick us up. And it turned out that nobody would pick her up because they thought that she was one of these phantom hitchhiker figures called the Nullarbor nymph, who was redheaded like she was and wore red high-heeled shoes, and she had on red pumps. And it was actually a manufactured urban legend that took hold and became reality, just like Slender Man did. And this Nullarbor nymph wasn't necessarily a bad figure, but supposedly truckers would pick up this female figure thinking she was a real woman and take her along for, a long ride, and then she would disappear. But supposedly she had a good aspect to her because she kept them awake. But here's a case of a real-life person being mistaken for something that was supposed to be supernatural. And I think that sometimes these things are projections from consciousness, and they coalesce into something that, as a thought form, literally takes on its own life.
That's fascinating. It's always great catching up with you, Rosemary, and I love the new book, The Road to Strange, Travel Tales of the Paranormal and Beyond. Michael Bryan and Rosemary Ellen Guiley, the authors of the new book, and it's out and available, and you've got a new book you're working on, should be out in a month or two. Werewolves and Dogmen is the title. It's an anthology, the best of Fate magazine, and some of my own pieces as well. Famous authors like Brad Steiger, Lauren Coleman, Scott Corrales, all weighing in with some creepy real-life stories of werewolves. Fantastic. What do you make? Are dogmen and werewolves two different things, or is it just the new trendy title is to call them dogmen?
They are two different things, and the dogmen are the hybrids that seem to be part wolf or part dog and part human, like the Beast of Bray Road that Linda Godfrey researched so well. And werewolves are transformations. They're humans into wolves.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to talking to you about that and sharing some time. And you work with Fate Mag. They can find that at fatemag.com, correct? Fatemag.com?
Well, Fate Magazine they can, yes.
Right. I was just saying, because I know you work still with Fate Magazine on that too.
Oh, yes.
Right. So they can find, Fate Mag is still out. What is it? I think it's quarterly, isn't it? 4 times a year. You can get these great magazines loaded with Fortean information and from some of the top writers in the world.
That's right. Going on since 1948 now, and still around. We have an e-edition and a hard print edition. And yes, it is quarterly now. That's just the way magazines, hard print magazines are going. It's harder and harder to keep them up on a monthly basis.
Well, Rosemary, thank you very much. I know you're out vacationing, and you interrupted your time to spend an evening with us here. So thank you so much, and we'll look forward to talking to you again here in the future.
Well, same here, Dave, and have a great trip to England.
I will, and we'll report back to you, let you know what we find out there. That's it for tonight, kids. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow with more of the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.